Hey, mate, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, mate. How you doing? You all right?
All good, mate. Mate, I feel bad. I feel like the you might have wanted to chill out, and now the pity hand has gone up.
No. What it is, like, I've obviously been out of the loop for a few months, sort of since end of July, early August. So a lot of this new Season of Mastery stuff is fresh to me. But I feel like I want to know what's going to be different. I want to get my head around what's going to be different from the classic WoW experience that me and the missus had for, 2 years and the time we spent in it. So, yeah, I'm happy to come in and sort of go over, especially trolling Reddit.
You're a good man. Mate, I was just saying, and we might as well sort of start on this route, whether or not you've got much to say on it, but I'm happy to sort of monologue for a little bit. It's even before all the Blizzard stuff, it was very, very obvious that, Blizzard was not a beloved company anymore. And there is a lot of online vitriol towards them and their business practices and the way in which they go about making games and making money. That's, another thing altogether. But it's an odd situation where, albeit for a relatively niche crowd, a small team at Blizzard has, in my mind, started to do really well. And it is a shitty situation where, it didn't take much for Blizzard to be applauded. They've been so ridiculously, to say it average almost feels like I'm being too kind. They've been such a relatively, you guys term it however you want to term it, whether I say relatively subpar, missing the mark, average or shitty company in terms of the products that they're producing or the business structures that they're building around the products that they're producing for years now. It didn't take much to basically rise above that and go like, oh, they're doing things decently now. And I really think Season of Mastery, their actual approach from the company has been noticeably different. And it's been, number one, refreshing. And like we said on the latest podcast, you've got to give credit where credit is due. You have to. You can't just, I think a lot of people on Reddit, you lose a lot of credit behind what you say if Blizzard can never, ever appease you. If everything they do is, nah, that's fucked. They're terrible. They're fucked. They're all the devil. Fuck Blizzard. And then, if Blizzard came out and released the greatest game of all time tomorrow, you have to be able to say, holy shit, that's a great game. They actually did it. You can't be switched into necessarily Blizzard never mode. And I know that's a loaded statement, but what I'm getting at is, objectively speaking, if they release a good game or if they make a good business decision, you need to be able to go, oh, okay, that was good, rather than, nah, fuck you. Don't care if that pleases people. You suck. You fucked, Blizzard. It's a weird environment, and there's a lot of, gamer bros that act that way, and that's just gaming, unfortunately, in 2021. But the Season of Mastery team has been really good so far as I'm concerned. They've been knocking it out of the park in terms of actually making us feel heard. And in my mind, I know here's rule number one of, this isn't just gaming, this is everything in life. You are never going to please everyone. There are always going to be people bent out of shape about the decisions you make. This MMORPG, you're making really key balancing decisions, really big, in the grand scheme of things, relatively big redesign decisions. Of course, there's going to be a lot of players like, whoa, that doesn't work for me, Sunshine, dial it back a little bit. But I think the goal is to get to the greater good. And are we pleasing the majority of players? Look, I'm really trying to read the room on Season of Mastery, and I feel like the people who are into the concept, we've got to divide the players here. Sorry, Watts, I'm going on really long here. I promise I'll get to you really soon. I'm being really obnoxious.
No, you go. You're on a roll.
Divide the player base into, we shall cut the cake in twain. People who are interested and intrigued and, somewhat positive to very positive about Season of Mastery versus the naysayers who have no interest whatsoever and want to do everything in their power and burn all the calories in shitting on it because they don't want to play it, because that's, again, what weird gamers do in 2021. I will kick down doors and enter burning buildings in order to let you know that I don't like this thing and I won't be playing it with you. Thanks, mate. That's great. So we divided the player base, well, not the player base, the crowd looking at this thing too. Now we look to the first group of people, forget the second group. This group of people who are interested in the product and are relatively upbeat about it. You will not please all of them by these respective changes that you are making, but you have to grab the majority. And that's what I think Blizzard is actually doing, again, on a reading of the room. And I've read so much fucking Reddit over the last couple of weeks, guys. Not even a couple of weeks, over the last, 6 weeks. I weaned myself off of Reddit for a long time there. I've slowly come crawling back. I don't comment. I comment like once a month and like it's one line. Cause I don't like getting in online fights, and Reddit's a very good place for online fights if you're into that kind of thing. I don't comment on Reddit. I lurk, and that's just me. I'm a lifelong lurker in general. But the room seems to be positive about Season of Mastery. They seem to have grasped the majority of people who were positive about the game and pleased them. As I spit across the room. That was a great look, Josh. And that's something that wasn't really happening during the life cycle of WoW Classic. We felt like not only was there, whether you call it mismanagement, but just a complete lack of interest in managing anything. I've continuously used the analogy and the shitty, tired old joke now of dad going out for cigarettes and never coming back as soon as the game was launched. We look at examples like Chronoburn coming out at the 11th hour, like fucking a month before the game was over. Here you have Chronoburn. Great. Where was that fucking design philosophy 2 years ago? Or, as you were monitoring things on the fly. It's a decision like Chronoburn is in such stark contrast to what they're actually doing now with Season of Mastery in terms of getting ahead of problems in advance and trying to spice things up. They're looking at how the player base actually engages with the content and trying to make, maybe minor adjustments, but an adjustment nonetheless to how we are going to enjoy this game. And you have to applaud them. You have to say good. And again, it sucks that something was better than nothing, but it is still something. It's an odd situation to sit here and applaud Blizzard because you do feel awkward doing it because of how you felt about them in the past. But I still think the adage of credit where credit is due somewhat applies. Now, I am so sorry for that very, very extended monologue. Did anything I just say resonate with you at all, or would you like to loudly disagree with me?
I have been frantically jotting all sorts of little bits down while you've been on that fantastic little rant. Don't you worry. No, you're absolutely spot on. I think since what happened over the summer with Blizzard Activision as a whole and their public image, everything's been damage limitation, in my opinion. Everything, that they've been able to do is, right, how do we fix it? Season of Mastery must have always been on the cards in some respect, because it's kind of giving the player base or a proportion of the player base. It was on the cards 15 months ago or whatever. Whenever Holly was hired, bang, boom, done. It had already been decided. Absolutely. And I feel like it couldn't have come at a better time for them to maybe swing people's perception of, how do I interact and what's my relationship with this company again? I mean, I completely stepped away from all Blizzard games and had no intention of coming back. Season of Mastery kind of piqued my interest. I won't be on my own. It's got to be some sort of portion of the player base. But is that improving the company's image? Is that going to sort of try and spark the resubs? Because obviously a lot of people have stepped away as well. And it's also, how does it fit into the rest of their product base? You've got to consider, you mentioned splitting the player base. You've got retail players, classic TBC players, the private server community that's going to jump on Season of Mastery. And, how do you divide that player base up but not impact sort of the quality of the product, as it were? I mean, we've all seen the populations on the classic servers that have stayed classic. There's nobody on there. So yeah, absolutely. It's what you've said, spot on. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with you, mate.
Mate, we should sort of get into a bunch of the things that have happened in the last 24 hours, because I think you're as good a person as any to ask these questions. As someone who has sort of had their interest piqued by Season of Mastery. Well, I'll start very general with that one. And as always, guys, I'm going to say this 1,000 times over the next 2 hours or so. If you'd like to join the chat, you are more than welcome. Just click the hand button. I mean, the question often, one of the most asked questions about Season of Mastery that I see from people who are probably more naysayer than anything else is, who is this for? Who is the target audience of this game? Why does it exist? It doesn't seem like they're actually appealing to anyone. It's a take I disagree with, because as I said sort of on the last pod, I think that you and I are sitting here and obviously the fuckwits are going to be like, oh, what, 2 people? You and I are sitting here and we are the people that it's appealing to. And my background is that I loved Classic. I played TBC. I quickly worked out that TBC and the system structure was not for me. And I walked away from it very early in its life cycle. And I've been waiting for something to fill the void. It certainly wasn't fucking New World. Tried that one, hated it, walked away after 12 hours. You can't judge an MMO after 12 hours. I did. And here I am sort of just floating in the ether looking for something. And then Season of Mastery comes along and people ask the question of, well, is it for casuals or is it for hardcores? And we'll talk about, maybe por qué no los dos. Because I would throw it to you, mate, and just say, tell me what specifically about Season of Mastery pulled you back in, almost as just the world's smallest focus group here of why have we decided to subscribe to Season of Mastery and throw cash at Blizzard? What was it about this game that grabbed us and earned our patronage?
So starting with what you said about New World, we did exactly the same. We both bought it. We put maybe just shy of a fortnight into it. Maybe 20 or so hours. And at first it was like, oh, this is different. This is great. But then I think it comes back to like the WoW ecosystem and what we're familiar with. I think that's why a lot of people may sort of branch off to other MMOs, but then they come back to what they know. I mean, some people have been playing this game since launch, never unsubbed, and then went back to maybe the expansion they enjoyed the most. You're absolutely spot on with TBC, and it's a different vibe from Classic. So people that aren't necessarily wearing rose-tinted goggles, but that enjoyed that version of the game, it's nice to still have that option without sort of having to go to private servers where your progress is not guaranteed. You could be playing and putting all your time and investing it into this character, and then the server could get shut down with an NDA at any time. Whereas maybe you've got a bit more stability knowing it's an official Blizz server. I think it's for people that have got a lower or less time to invest in the game as well, especially with these XP changes. You're talking 6 weeks, 1 to 60 if you're playing casually and you're working a full-time job in Classic, or certainly how long it took us. If that time's coming down, people that have got less time to put into the game are going to be able to achieve more and just drop in and out. So where you mentioned, is it the casual player, is it a hardcore player? I can't see why it's got to be binary. Why can it not be both?
I completely agree. Completely agree. And I think that the naysayers obviously want to do everything in their power to shoot down this game. And again, that's how gaming works. People want to declare dead game on everything like a meme before they've even launched. I don't understand why people are so keen for things to not succeed. But again, fucking dude bro gamer culture 2021, baby.
Get a look at this legend over here.
That's my notification goes off. Thanks so much for the sub, Ren Maggi. I really appreciate it. I don't know if they'll be including a headless Joshman in the Halloween event. Oh dear. It'd just be a beer stained t-shirt, a body without a head. But look, for the casuals, there are people who obviously want to do the leveling experience and on a fresh server and have that thing of everyone going along together to 60. And the naysayers would say, yeah, cool. That's great. What happens when all those filthy casuals either hit 60 or hit 40 after 3 months and then quit? Now you've got your fucking dead server. And I slightly disagree with that because I think the take is that if there's not a thriving raiding scene, the server is dead. But if you have bodies out in the open world, yeah, maybe there are still a bunch of people trawling through their 30s and 40s because they haven't had the time to play the game. It's still a living world. Guilds not having as many people to recruit from because maybe there's not as many sweaty players on the server. It doesn't necessarily mean that your server is struggling. There's still people out there playing the game, and there will be sweaters to choose from. But from the sweaty angle as well, they're saying, well, I'm a sweaty player who loves world buffs and loves to, push speed runs and everything and get the most out of the vanilla that I know. Blizzard has now bastardized that. So they've alienated that crowd now. So you don't have the sweaties, and that's that. But I really do think with the changes that they've brought in the last 24 to 48 hours, I think a portion, not all, I think a portion of the sweaters have become more and more intrigued. I think there's been a few eyebrows cocked in Season of Mastery's direction over the last few days by those people who weren't in at the start when it was first announced, who now go, new mechanics? Look, if the raid doesn't take 3 hours to get through, maybe, quicker ranking. Sounds like something I could be mildly intrigued with. That could be an interesting little PvP season. I just think that some of the little things are starting to bring in a portion of that very, very sweaty crowd. Look, as I say, amongst the naysayers, there's always going to be people who, as soon as world buffs were taken away, were never going to play this thing. And they're now the people who are just going so far out of their way to dump on it and let everyone else know that they're not going to be playing it and question why someone else would want to play it. But I also believe that there's a few more of that crowd that maybe aren't being as vocal, that are starting to turn around. But do you think that they've done enough? And you've basically already said, why not both? Why does it have to be binary? Do you think that they've done enough recently to maybe pique that interest of the sweaty crowd that initially wasn't interested?
Yeah, I think some of the changes sort of go hand in hand with one another, not necessarily announced or released at the same time. I mean, I'm frantically trying to catch up with what's sort of been said on the forums in the last few days, other than, what you've already mentioned. But I certainly think the removal of world buffs, but then the retuning or new mechanics in what we've seen in Molten Core at least, I don't understand how and I'm using inverted commas here, the hardcore raiding scene that would go out and stack world buffs and play their character for about 5 minutes between raid nights just to get those world buffs, aren't seeing an opportunity where they can discover that new meta and deliver a performance above what they've achieved before by being able to do it without being carried by buffs. And it's going to mix it up. We've all done it for the last 2 years before Classic came out, these raids, week in, week out. Even if you're raiding Nax, you're still going back to Molten Core on ults. So it's got to be, mixed up a little. But they're adding 2 levels of difficulty, taking the world buffs away, adding the new mechanics. The people that aren't interested, this is purely my opinion, the people that aren't interested in doing this because they've not got the world buffs, don't believe they're capable of doing it without them, and therefore they're just going to think they're going to bang their head against a brick wall. Look at what the hardcore group's done today. And I mean the actual sort of the hardcore play challenge. They've gone through Molten Core. They've done it in this previous gear. They've proven it can be done. Why can't people stack up and try and find new metas and new exciting ways to go through the content?
Well, to step into the shoes, if someone of that proclivity were here, I'm sure they'd say, because the company line it tends to be, no, I can totally do it. It just takes too long and it's not interesting.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. But it's not interesting side of things. If you're blitzing through mechanics and fights that should last a couple of minutes in, sub 60 seconds, you're making that fight boring for yourself, in my opinion. Look at a rag fight. How many guilds sort of manage to just blitz through and not even see a submerge in early Classic? And then the first time you saw it, it's like, oh, there's another stage here. That part of the fight, you're bricking it. Anything can go wrong, you know? So I think it's what's the word? It's almost symbiotic. You need both ends of the stick to sort of calibrate with one another. But I'm all for changes in the raids. I'm excited to see how Blackwing Lair might change, how AQ might change, because they could be difficult raids, you know, if you weren't on your game. I feel. Oh, sorry, no, go on.
No. You go.
I was just going to say, like, I'm interested to see what's going to happen with warriors because, you know, they were, you know, they were a staple part of a lot of speedrunning guilds because of the power that they brought with world buffs. It'll be interesting to see how that meta changes, as well, to sort of what's going to accommodate those slots. And
well,
the reduced.
That's one of the interesting things with Warriors because, you know, the word for the last few weeks has been, no, Warriors will still be number one. That's great. But with these new mechanics that they've just introduced in the last 24 hours, people are already starting to report that there's a lot of melee unfriendliness in Molten Core already. And that on some fights, again, you know, it depends on what group you've got, skill level of players and all that shit. But, you know, just light anecdotal stuff is already coming back going, oh, you know, we did, I can't remember the boss they were talking about, but whatever boss. And, you know, mages and warlocks and hunters were up the top. So it will be interesting to see if the meta does actually shift a little bit. And even on a boss to boss basis would be quite interesting. And as I've said repeatedly on the show, I'm all for it. The number one goal is to shift the meta, even if only slightly. But, maybe we might get into that stuff after I've sort of buried the lead because we haven't even discussed the fact that the release date was announced, which is very unlike me. But we'll get to the Molten Core stuff and the changes to the rating scene after this point. But, you know, November 16th is the worldwide release date. You know, November 17 for us Australians or New Zealanders or Southeast Asians in this part of the world. And it's so incredibly close. And this is really the Blizzard MO, isn't it? They don't generally announce a release until about a fortnight before it comes. There's no sort of month or two heads up and all that. It's kind of par for the course at this point. It is what it is. Oddly enough, a week ago in the Discord, I mentioned off the cuff that I felt like November 16th was going to be the release date because it just felt really close. And, you know, we were getting news at such a ridiculously hyperactive rate by Blizzard standards, that it was starting to just feel right around the corner. And, I actually picked the November 16th release date, because, I used what I think is probably partially flawed reasoning, that I thought with the Final Fantasy XIV expansion Endwalker coming out on the 23rd of November, that everyone was saying they'll launch it on the 23rd of November because it's not only a WoW anniversary, but it's also the same day as Final Fantasy and you get to, you know, try and take a chunk out of their player base, which I thought, look, not that I necessarily think that Season of Mastery is the tool with which to try and do your little corporate espionage. Wouldn't you do it a week before to try and get people creating characters, get them tasting the drug and make it harder for them to walk away from the character that they just put, you know, 12 hours in over the last week in Season of Mastery before heading over to Endwalker when it releases? Because I mean, I play both. If people don't know, I love Final Fantasy XIV. I play a lot of it, probably a lot more than you think I do. And I'm very excited for that expansion, but I will be playing both. I say it's a partially flawed reasoning because again, it's very easy to say that this was Blizzard's only focus, that they just wanted to try and, you know, squeeze some of the customers away from Square Enix. But there's a lot more to it than that. There's also like quarterly earnings to take into account. You know, dropping things in the right window of time between content releases for TBC and whatnot. So whilst I think, yeah, sure, partially or maybe more than partially, Final Fantasy might have come into the equation a bit, but I think it's wrong to sort of put 100% of the reasoning on the Final Fantasy factor. I think Blizzard probably has a lot of in-house things that they need to take care of. And, you know, I'm sounding like a Blizzard apologist here, but I'm really not. If you guys have listened to the show for years, you know how I sort of feel about Blizzard. But that's just how I sort of took it in. But, mate, what did you think of the November 16th release date? A lot of people are saying it's bad timing. This is a bad release date, you know, given where TBC is at and all of that jazz. How do you feel about it?
So I feel like there's a lot of going-ons in the background by people much more in the know than I am, sort of at Blizzard, that possibly will have taken Endwalker into consideration, you know, or at least it was on the radar. Whether it was a massively contributing factor to it, who knows? But I was just sort of comparing it to the phase release schedule for TBC Classic, and we're talking almost exactly 2 months from phase 2 being launched to Season of Mastery going live. So it's fitting right down the middle of that. If the conversations sort of we've been having with some former guildmates are happening everywhere, then people are starting to sort of bleed away from guilds. So the content's already stale for a lot by the sounds of things. It gives people, I mean, what you're talking, a fortnight before Final Fantasy releases. That's
one week.
1 week. Okay. So a week's not enough time for people to get to 60 even with a reduced XP rate. Certainly not the vast majority of the population, but I feel like they've kind of got to play to their strengths. If it is a consideration with Final Fantasy, that we'll get these people in, we'll give them a week. They're going to be, you know, they're tied in at that point. You might be sort of level 30, level 40. If you're aiming to level cap, you're not going to jump straight onto Final Fantasy on day one necessarily. You know, yourself, like you say, you play a lot of it, you might jump in. I think it's also, again, to familiarity. People know roughly what to expect from a 1 to 60 classic experience. A new expansion, whatever game it is always a sort of unknown, sometimes a minefield. You know, it could be great. It could just tank off straight away. Thinking about Warlords of Draenor. Maybe if they've got those people with that week in, back invested in WoW, maybe go away a little bit. Final Fantasy, it's not what they expected. They come back to WoW, and then suddenly you're talking Christmas. And I mean, I don't know what the retail content release schedule looks like, but you would think
they've got I think I don't want to call it a big one because I don't play retail, but I think a relatively important patch dropping 9.1.5, I think, right around the corner. So it's very close to this release as well.
Yeah, so you don't want to saturate what you're bringing out when you've got people that might be playing across the platforms that you've got out there. You know, I'm sure there's still an audience that play retail and classic TBC, but time's a limiting factor. What do you as an individual want to invest your time into? Something that you know and you've perhaps loved for 15, 16 years, something that's brand new, or something that's, you know, completely unknown. It's each to their own, I think, on that side of it.
An interesting point on the TBC stuff, and it's all well and good for me to talk about this when I don't play TBC anymore, and I really need to sort of put my TBC hat on a little bit. Look, it's not like I can't empathize with TBC players. Yes, I do know what is going on with TBC right now. You know, it's not like it's dead by any stretch of the imagination. People are absolutely still playing TBC, but guilds are starting to struggle to recruit, and people are noticing a little bit of a shift in players being available to play the game. One of the calls coming out from TBC players en masse seems to sort of be, why would you release TBC in June of this year just to partially, if not mostly, sync it with Season of Mastery Classic Fresh in November of the same year, just, you know, a scant 5.5 months later. I think the problem with that is that Season of Mastery is being dropped in between phases for TBC, and people are sort of saying, why now? But it was either now or between the next phase of TBC, and then people go, good, you know, do it then between phase 3 and 4 or whatever, instead of between phase 2 and 3. I'm not 100% sure. It's so hard to gauge what portion of the TBC player base is going to actually be attracted to Season of Mastery, and if Season of Mastery could, contribute to hammering TBC servers populations. Look, it probably will. I'm not going to be naive. There's probably going to be a lot of TBC players that jump on this Season of Mastery thing, even though we're not expecting Season of Mastery to be overly popular. I think there will be a decent portion of TBC Classic players that at least check it out. So I'm sort of more of the mind that there was never going to be a quote-unquote right time to release Season of Mastery during the life cycle of TBC Classic. So, it had to come at some point, and it was just a matter of picking your poison. So I sort of understand why they've done it now as opposed to delaying it to 3 more months later until the next phase or what have you. Do you know what I'm saying, Watts? Do you think that there was no such thing as a right time?
No, absolutely, because it's not just launch day. You've got to look much bigger picture. Blizz will be forecasting sort of sub numbers for this time next year in some respects. If you've got something that's going to have a 12-month lifespan, then you've got to think, right, when this comes to renew, so November 2022, what else is going to be sort of on the cards then? You could speculate we might be looking at the next retail expansion, because you almost 2 years of Shadowlands at that point. Probably too early for sort of Wrath to be coming out. You'd expect that, sort of middle of 2023. But again, it's how does everything overlap? How do you avoid sort of it all happening at the same time? There's certainly not a perfect time to do it, but this sort of fits in with, it's not stepping on the toes of Phase 2 for TBC Classic. It's probably, if it's close to the retail patch 0.5, then they're not seeing or not expecting there to be a massive crossover of players there. It certainly is not like Nax and Shadowlands coming out at the same time. But they've got to bring it out. I think it's a bit of damage limitation, as I said earlier. Try and sort of swing the sort of general majority's opinion of Blizz. Try and win some people back over. And you're not going to drop it at Christmas. And it's probably too soon to drop it close to the last patch for Burning Crusade. So squeeze it in now, see how it goes.
And Mike is on point with something he's just said in Twitch chat, which is something I've definitely noticed already every time there's a release date announcement. And again, it comes back to the number one thing of you can't please everybody. When they announce a date, Mike says the right time for people is only when they have well enough time in advance to take time off and plan out everything. Otherwise, they'll say it's too soon, no matter what. And I've definitely already run into multiple people, saying or reporting back that, that's no good. This is fucked, Blizzard. Why would you release it then? I can't get time off that week, or I've got the kid that week, or I'm going on holiday that week, or whatever. It's not going to line up with everyone's calendars, unfortunately. And I agree. It does suck. We don't get more notice that people can't put in for their paid time off if that's your thing. But sadly, that's now Blizzard's track record, is they do give us very little notice. For whatever reason, I don't know. It's something that I wish they would revisit, because people do take time off for video games. Hello, I'm one of those people. When Classic came out, I took PTO for the launch. It's just one of those things. It's always going to be like that. But mate, let's go through some of the Molten Core stuff, because I think this is the biggest talking point right now. And we discussed recently, just on the last episode of the show, and it's something that I will get into a bit more as we go on, of, doing the Goldilocks test for Season of Mastery. What is just right in terms of difficulty? We're going through the too hot and too cold phase right now, and hopefully we do eventually land on just right. But I'm going to maybe just very quickly, I should say, sorry, I don't want to keep you here all night, mate. By all means, have you got a little bit of time up your sleeve, or have you got to run?
I'm here as long as you need, mate.
Oh, mate, you're a sweetheart. I love you. All right, well, I won't push the friendship, but I'll keep you for a little while. And I just thought, I'll read some of these new mechanics back to you and just get your reaction, and we'll have a quick discussion, maybe just a minute or two on each boss.
Sure. Okay.
So Onyxia is one that people are really sort of going like, whoa, this one is hitting hard. And it's been very difficult for pugs on the Season of Mastery beta. I think it's important to first get the note out about we have to view everything through a certain prism when we're talking about the testing that's underway on the Season of Mastery beta. You know, we're working within very, very tight testing windows first and foremost that we'll get to later as to, you know, the reasoning behind why Blizzard is giving us such limited time to test raids. There's, you know, a couple of different potential theories out there, but you're trying to sort of make do with whoever you can gather at the time. Let's talk about, you know, the makeup of the player base on the Season of Mastery beta. I really feel like a lot of people are, I base that on nothing. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but like, I feel like some people are playing classes that they just want to try out, that they might have little to no experience with, that they're just testing to see if they want to switch mains for Season of Mastery, or even if they're not switching mains, they're just mixing it up just to play something different on the beta. And they're going along to raids on a class that they don't have expert mastery of. They might not be using all the right spells or the right rotation. And so it waters down and absolutely dilutes the talent in the raid, I think, when you take that into equation. When you mix that in as well with, you know, maybe they don't have Discord. They probably definitely don't all have Discord together. Some of them, you know, like with our raid, we did a raid of 40 last week and I think only 20 of us were in the Discord. So that makes it tough communication wise. And then you walk into a raid where there's new fucking mechanics. So it's lower skill, less cohesion as a group, no communication. I mean, it's like a military nightmare. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
you're automatically raising the bar that you've even stepped in the instance. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So people freaking out about the difficulty now. It's a hard thing to really freak out about. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some of it's warranted. I don't want this game to be, and Blizzard's already said, we don't want this to be something you will, you know, take weeks and weeks to progress through, bash your head against the wall, question as to why the fuck you're even doing this. They want to hit that sweet spot of new and spicy and challenging and engaging, but not redonkulously difficult. It's so hard to say, oh, my pug wiped for 3 hours on fucking Oni, or, you know, not that that's necessarily happening, but, you know, we did 5 attempts, we wiped 5 times and the group broke up. Nerf this, Blizzard. I really would say hold your horses a little bit, because I just don't think that's the right testing environment. We don't know enough. Now, the problem is that, yeah, the testing environment isn't going to be out there for very long, so what the fuck do we do? But, mate, I'll throw it to you, and just before we go through the bosses one by one, tell me if you're picking up what I'm putting down, and do you think that this actually it's a decent enough testing environment, or it's going to create some problems?
So I think I'd be naive to assume that this is the only testing environment. You know, this is what's available to the general public, but I would be surprised if there's not also some internal testing going on, or certainly some. You've got to assume the people making Season of Mastery are now more leaning towards the employees that enjoy the game rather than those that are making it and programming it for profitable purposes. So I would expect there to be a sort of mishmash of what's going off in the background. But yes, it's got to be a lot more difficult unless you are putting a cohesive raid guild into this testing environment that gels off one another, that can communicate well, that knows the class they're playing. I don't feel like you're getting a representation of the encounter true to what's going to happen, you know, week one when guilds eventually do get in there. That being said, if the mechanics are just what are killing people and not the players themselves, if that sort of makes sense. I know what I mean. I hope it comes across. Then and that's an issue with the encounter and not the people sort of taking part in it. But no, I absolutely get where you're coming from.
I think another thing is, again, there's a portion of the player base that will not be budged from two positions when it comes to their mentality surrounding WoW Classic. And these are two mentalities that I very vehemently disagree with. Number one is I should be able to easily kill every boss anytime I attempt it. Number two is I should get every best in slot item on my character at all times in every phase. That's how MMOs are to be played. I very much so disagree with those two mindsets. And I don't believe that that's how MMOs are supposed to be played.
Can I jump straight in?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
You've proper pulled the trigger on that, and it's something I've sort of took note of. Look what happened when the game was released in its original form with a higher skill sort of level on the player base. It was just too easy for a lot of people, and people complained and moaned, and it was, we raid for a few hours a week, and that's all I want to do at end game, but now I've got nothing else to do. It's too easy. Make it harder. And Blizzard didn't. They stuck to their guns and left it as it was. So, we can't have the same argument, now it's too hard. Well, you asked for it. And with this gear, you've really only got, I'm guessing, an 8 week period between, 8 weeks between phases if you're going to have a 12-month life cycle. Not everybody's going to sort of max their BIS list out, and you've not got time to be banging your head against a wall with these encounters. People are going to have to adapt and be fluid certainly with the gear they get. Maybe assume they're not going to finish their BIS list before the next phase and the next the next tier content. I mean, hunters in Blackwing Lair were funneled gear based on the set bonus. It cannot now be assumed that you're going to kit out a particular player before sort of anybody else, because you might not get 8 weeks worth of equipment to sort of plan for that. Everything's got to change. The whole mindset and mentality of raiding in this life cycle has got to change.
The one thing I do agree with, though, to a certain extent, you touched on this just then, is I do think there is a line, though, with the difficulty, and I'm with you in that I'm belly laughing at the contrast between 2 years ago, people saying it's too easy, and now people saying it's too hard. But I think there's actually a mild element of truth there, where I think that Blizzard probably did go a little far with what they've done so far in terms of doubling health pools and new mechanics and loot scarcity. That will be a bit much, I do believe. But I think there's, again, already been reports of possibly, guys, it's all so early. This is just happening within the last few hours, and it could be complete bullshit. I read a comment or two about people saying like, it looks like Blizzard's already reverted the health pool change. I don't know. Don't shoot me if that's wrong. Like, this is all happening on the fly, and Blizzard's actually changing things a lot on the fly. Alenia was in a raid a few hours ago. They had a Blizzard GM with them, actively talking to them and changing fights as they were doing them. So I think they killed Sulfuron, and the GM literally goes, hang on, I'm going to respawn him. Can you try that one again? I've added something. So it's all this crazy period of things just changing fucking everywhere. But, if they have reverted the health pool back to normal and then added in the new, very spicy mechanics, I think that's a happy medium, to be honest with you. Because we've got to take into account the fact that loot will not be dropping at a great rate given not that it won't be dropping at a great rate. We won't be accumulating loot at a great rate given the 12-month cadence. So I do agree with the naysayers who are saying dead game 12-month cadence, you won't have the loot to clear content to a certain extent, where Blizzard has a very tough job ahead of them in terms of really needing to constantly monitor this raid difficulty and balancing that against the amount of loot that is being dispersed. Because I think the naysayers are right to already point out, wait until you get to the Nax phase and that loot disparity is so glaringly obvious. Now, I'm not saying, again, I'm very much so against needing BIS. Look, whether I'm wrong on this, I'm not going to say this. I'm going to ask the question. Does every character in your raid need best in slot gear from the current phase in order to down bosses in the next phase? What do you think, mate?
No. In a 40-man raiding environment, and certainly in the experience I had for the first 3 quarters of Classic WoW, you needed 25 maximum players that knew what the fuck they were doing and how to play their class, and regardless of the gear that they were wearing, they could perform their role, and they would carry the other 15 people. They
still needed some gear, I'm sure. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're going to run in with sort of low level of the monkeys.
Sure, absolutely. But you laugh, we've seen it. But I don't know. To answer the question, I don't think everybody needs to be, or I'd say if half the raid is in BIS gear, that is enough to then gear up the people that might be behind or that weren't as dependent on the gear with whatever's dropping at the start of the next phase. I mean, you look at a lot of classes. When I was playing mage, you'd go some phases where there wouldn't be a massive change between your BIS because you needed to maintain the hit gear, or what you were going to replace it with was such a low drop chance or a tier piece that certainly in Nax where the priority was to other classes. So no, sorry, long-winded answer. No, I don't think you need everybody in BIS.
Okay. Do you share the concern that, even keeping that in mind, that you don't need everyone in BIS, do you share the concern that the 12-month life cycle will still affect loot accumulation on characters so much to the extent that by the time you do get to AQ and Nax, it's actually going to be a bit of a problem?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you're getting to certainly to Nax, but even if you look at sort of AQ and you're in tier 1, you've struggled in Blackwing Lair, you've not necessarily picked any pieces up from there. Bearing in mind, a lot of classes, BIS trinkets are in Blackwing Lair for the rest of the game, or certainly for the most part of it. If you struggle in there, yes, AQ is going to be a struggle. But it's a beta test. Yes, we've only got 2 weeks till release, but it's not like Blizzard aren't known for making changes on the fly, even after launch, or right up until the 11th hour, where we might see a difference in how loot's dropped. If they're going to the extent that they are in changing the mechanics of the boss, I can't see it being out of the question that they might drop an extra piece or a 50% chance of an extra piece from bosses to help gear people up. I don't think anything's off the table at this point until people say no.
I agree. From everything that I've seen and heard from Blizzard so far, and also like even, I've told you guys numerous times, I very, very rarely talk in the Blizzard content creator Discord. I'm not a big fan of sort of going to town over there. But I've been really passionate about this Season of Mastery stuff. So like I've spoken up a little bit in the last couple of weeks, and seeing the rhetoric over there from Blizzard has again been night and day, where, I raised questions to them in their Discord. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Where I said, hey guys, applause for these new mechanics. I wasn't expecting this. That's really amazing to see that you guys have actually been cool with sort of thinking outside the box on this one and spicing things up. People do seem to be kind of concerned though, like just keep an eye on it. If this does turn out to be a bit of a longer fight or pushing the rate a bit, just, what's happening with meme specs?
G'day, mates.
They might start to struggle with their mana pools and whatnot, and they're going to get even more ostracized than before, perhaps. And I got positive chat on that at least they're considering and monitoring the situation with meme specs. The other thing was, there was something else that I mentioned. The trash health. And I said, just, while I've got you, one more thing, guys. A lot of people seem really down on doubling the trash health. Like, is that something that necessarily needs to go hand in hand with the boss health buff? Like, again, in reading the room, the Season of Mastery player base seems to not really want to do the long, tedious trash fights. And again, they got straight back to me and they were like, yep, the team is actually looking at the trash health as we speak. So, and it might have already been adjusted. I'm not sure. But what I'm getting at is when you say it seems like everything's on the table, within reason, I actually think you're right. I think there's a lot more on the table for potential changes than we probably do realize. And look, whether or not Nax is greatly changed, Nax is somewhat, it's difficult in and of itself, whether it needs, just because we're getting drastic change, well, not drastic, but some changes to Molten Core mechanics doesn't necessarily mean that every raid will follow suit. I think it will, but if Nax is already pretty difficult, maybe it goes through minor changes. I don't fucking know, but I'm just saying that they seem flexible, which is really, really good to see. I've really, really been enjoying that. But mate, we're all over the place. Guys, by the way, one more time, Whats is putting in a Herculean effort right here and carrying this chat. If you would like to join us and help take a little bit of the load off his shoulders, I've put the link in the Discord, in the Twitch stream. Please come and talk to us if you're available. If you've heard something that you would like to chime in on, come into the town hall, put your hand up. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. But until then, Whats, let's go through these bosses, mate. I mentioned already Onyxia, and then I ran off on the biggest tangent of all time. The Flames now disorient players, he spawns big ads during the flight phase, and these ads are causing mayhem. And the Nova Flame hurts more. These are just like ripped, very short, sharp comments from someone's summary on another Discord. What do you make of that? Onyxia is apparently reasonably tough now.
So, everything I see there is, in my opinion, designed to negate being able to just nuke Onyxia down and to skip mechanics. I'm not a fan of the disorientation mechanics. A good friend of ours from the last two guilds we were in coined a phrase, fun and interactive gameplay, where you just stood there looking at your monitor. You're not able to do anything. I'm not a big fan of things like that. But spawning ads during the flight phase, you're then taking the attention off Onyxia herself and being able to just burn her down, and then waiting for her to come down and just there being no phase 3 because she's just going to die instantly. Nova Flame hurting more. What we're referring to that is that as in the splitting down the room.
I have no idea. I think so. I don't know. So in early days, that's going to one-shot people anyway, while gear's still being collected from dungeons. So that might just be a bit of a mechanic to help the longevity of the raid. People will be going back there till the end of time anyway, because everybody wants bags, everybody wants blues for DE, and people will be gearing up ults. So yeah, I'm actually a big fan of that. I mean, Pirewood Village, there was a sub 20 second warrior attempt on Onyxia, where literally I think it was like 35 warriors ran in with a handful of healers and just burned her down. And while that's fun and great at the end of the expansion, I think anything to make the content more interesting while you're doing it, I'm all for it. I like them changes, apart from the disorientation. Okay. It seems to be the start of what a common theme is with these changes of we're going to push you to coordinate more with your group. If you do not talk to each other, if you don't communicate, if you don't work well as a unit, you might be a little bit up shit creek with this Season of Mastery. Okay. I mean, I get that. Comparing it to Nax, sorry, I'm just going back to what you said before as well. Nax was the turning point where mechanics really did matter. That's not to say the raids before then didn't have mechanics. Every boss in Molten Core did. But in Nax, there were a lot more, the success of the raid was a lot more dependent on all 40 people being able to manage those mechanics. Adding that level of difficulty to the earlier raids, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It's kind of putting everything on a level playing field, and it tests your skill more than anything. But I don't think this is going to put casuals off. Okay. Mate, we'll go into Molten Core. Lucifron, 2 more ads, 3 curses, debuffs more often. I think that's fine. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, the ads would normally get, well, the way we did it, we'd stack the ads and just cleave everything down. So by making you think about how you engage and the start of the fight as well, if you get a scuff pull, anything can happen. So adding 2 more ads, and that's as of now. On release, that could be 1 more ad, it could be 3. But I like the idea of just that extra level. 3 cursors, good. Mages need to do something.
Yes.
The amount of times I carried our guild with decursing on this fight and did absolutely nothing on the meters, this is now more important. You've got to get out of all for that.
You're a man after my own heart because, because I played a mage rating in phase 6 in classic, one of the 85 characters that I fucking had. But I do remember, I enjoy, and look, I might be a unicorn in this regard. I enjoy cleansing, removing debuffs and things like that. I've got a tool in my toolkit that helps the raid out. You get a fucking decurse, you get a decurse, all this shit. I like beating the other mages to it and feeling valuable and feeling useful. Yeah, the other mage gets to go, fucking look at my 99, bro. But I'm like, I get a bigger kick out of, yeah, while you were fucking pumping away, doing your one track thing, I was helping keep the raid alive. And I think that it's a good thing. We talked about this last week on the podcast. I actually think it's a good thing to try and somewhat extricate this pass brain mentality from the player base and bring it. And again, it's like, if we're trying to make this feel like vanilla, make these fights act in a way where if you just stand there like a turret and you're in pump mode, you are actively hurting your raid because we need you to either run around and do mechanics or debuff people cleanse debuffs or whatever. And all of the fun stuff that can come with the wild and wacky mechanics of MMOs, even though we're obviously dealing with relatively, simple mechanics per se compared to some of the stuff that modern games can give. But I applaud pushing the player base to stop casting a fucking spell and actually help out from time to time again. And I think it would be really fun, in a weird way, to create an environment where you do look at the logs and go, hey, we've got this fight where we need every fucking mage hitting that decurse button straight away. And Johnny, you didn't fucking hit one. What's your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we were very lucky in that, for the most part, we played with competent players. It wasn't necessarily the case from the start, but it certainly got better. And I'm a fond believer that shamans and paladins aren't the only support classes in this game. Everybody's got something in their toolkit that will make the encounter easier for everybody. The only way you're topping DPS meters on Lucifron is if you're ignoring the ads and you're just pumping him straight away anyway, which immediately makes you a bit of a dickhead. I don't think it's about necessarily the number. I'm focusing on the mage perspective, but I think it's just the curses thing that's got me going there. It's more of an emphasis on people doing their job, and it teaches the casual player, look, you're not just there to stand and cast Frostbolt or Fireball, depending where you are. You've got this other stuff that you can do that's going to make a massive impact on what the rest of the raid's doing. And there's a sense of personal accomplishment in that. You're still going to get a bit of douchebaggery and folks just focusing the boss, but no, I can't see a negative in, certainly on those at least.
I know that a lot of people enjoy passing, and I know that's such a pervasive gameplay, way of playing the game, in the modern age. I don't want to sit here and, if that's what you enjoy, go nuts. People would argue, and you'd probably be partially right, to sit here and go, oh, fucking, this Australian fuckwit just doesn't like passing because he can't get good passes. You're spot on. But, look, it's not entirely that. Like I said, I really do. I enjoy MMO design where it's like, push for as much damage as you can do. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy the challenge. But I enjoy the game asking me to do as much damage as I can do while also doing the mechanics, not ignore the mechanics and sit there and ask for heals and do as much damage as you can do. I feel like that's a weird, that's where it's like, I don't want this to turn into Season of Masturbation and just fucking look at my 99, bro. Oh yeah, look at that. Stroke. It really should be Season of Mastery of like, we're asking you to be a gamer, and being a gamer isn't fucking your rate over so you can individually succeed.
Yeah, the problem I've got with parsing is it focuses solely on how much damage you have done to a boss and how quickly you killed it. That doesn't sort of show you how effectively or how efficiently you killed that boss. If there was a way to alternate how parsers were recorded based on the encounter and your class, and I don't know how easy or difficult this would be and how many people would be sort of in the background that would be needed for it. But if you are a pure DPS class on a fight where you have got nothing else to do but pump numbers, fine. That's how you were efficient on that fight. Take Lucifron, for instance. If you are a decursing class, which is, your druids, your mages, if that's taken into consideration on your pass on that encounter, not just the amount of damage you're doing, I feel like parsers would be a much better representation of an individual's performance. And that's really what it's about, is somebody being able to say, I performed better than 99% of this data pool. At the minute, it's just on the numbers they're putting out, not how well they're playing their class, in my opinion. So if that could change, I'd be all for it. As it stands, I don't think it's a great sort of representation of how somebody's doing. Healers will back me up. Any healer that says that parsers are wonderful somehow managed to look a 99 or 100 on a fight, because they know that doesn't represent how they played that fight.
Yeah, well, healing passes are sort of, non-existent a thing in and of themselves. But do you know why you are the luckiest man in the world right now?
Is it?
Look who's joined us.
Hello, Whats?
Good evening. How are you doing?
Morning. Well, I've just woken up, got my coffee.
Oh, yeah. Mate, thank you so much for dropping in. I do appreciate it. Whats has been doing a tremendous effort, but now I'm titillated at the combination of the two of you going through MC with me. Hunk, before I go to the next boss, mate, first of all, I love you. Thank you so much for jumping in. It means the world to me. Did you hear anything while you're sipping on your coffee there that you wanted to jump in on quickly before we move on?
No, Whats is all over it. He knows his MC and what the players want. Well done, comrade.
I don't know how. I don't think you're quite clued up on my cluing up, but yeah, I'll take it. We spent a lot of time on.
Very good. Well, guys, let's talk about Magmadar. I think this is getting reports of being particularly like a spicy fight. People are going, Mag is fucking pushing groups really hard. All it says is flames make you unable to move, and he now spreads fire across the room. So I'm guessing, again, these are very brief notes that we've got going through the changes, but I'm guessing that would that be that the flame he spews forth now like effectively roots you in place, and he's putting more fires across the room than he usually does? Is that how you interpret it?
I thought he had ads as well.
Oh, he does too. That's not in these notes. Yeah, fucking, all right, I've got to update this shit. Yeah, he absolutely apparently spawned an 2 ads at every 20% or something. And if you killed them, they later rezzed or something?
Yeah, when the next ads
like the dogs you killed before him, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just like the lava packs, the hound packs.
What do you reckon of that?
I like that, like, the flames kind of like disorient a person or stun them so they can't move, snare them. Kind of like a heal check. Keep healers on their toes.
Isn't it called a root?
Yeah, okay, fine. It's early. I've been awake for half an hour.
No, I just want you to use the dirty language. Just talk about getting rooted.
Okay.
All right.
So you get rooted. What do you reckon, Whats?
So 2 things that stand out here is melee won't just be able to stand in the fire. Warriors won't just be able to generate rage from taking damage and bumping their passes, and the healers standing at the back screaming at them to get out of the fire. Spreads fire across the room, and literally just trying to imagine this, and I'm sort of, in my head, I'm comparing it to Archimonde from Mount Hyjal. And the space, what's the term I'm looking for? So area denial sort of idea behind that mechanic. In a fight where, you know, at the moment, you run to the boss, the tank faces him against a wall, everybody else stands still for a minute, boss falls over, collect loot, run back to the imps. Something that makes you need to move and be aware of the space you're in, yet not going to complain against that. Yeah, and if it means warriors will die in the fire because they need to get out of it, then they're going to have to learn to play their class.
Area denial, I think that's how they refer to the Sydney real estate market.
Ain't nobody getting in there, yeah?
Hasn't median house prices peaked at 1.3 million in Sydney area now?
Oh, they're only going up and up and up. It's so ridiculous.
What?
Yeah, hit a new high just recently. Yeah,
anyway, yeah. So, I by the way, guys, if it's not obvious, I don't think these two lovely gentlemen, we haven't seen footage of the fights yet. I know there are streams already out there where these, you know, encounters have been taken down. It's early in the morning here in Australia. I've not had the time to go through them. So I'm just working off of these really rough, like Reddit or Discord notes of people going, oh yeah, it does this, that, and that. And I'm having to like interpret what it actually means. So if we get anything wrong, I do apologize. We'll correct it on a future show. But yeah, Hunk, anything else on Magmadar? Are you excited for that little challenge?
Like what was saying with just changing the shape of the arena over the course of the fight, making it a bit more cramped. It's I think a lot of these fights, they don't need to necessarily make them massively more difficult, but just change them substantively for those of us who've done them 50 times. And little things like this, that's all we need.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think just adding spice and only, you know, a little bit of challenge is more than enough. Because I was saying to Whats before you joined in, Hunk, and I'd love to know your thoughts just real quick. My opinion was the double health pool plus the new mechanics, some of which are pretty crazy, plus the loot scarcity was going a bit far.
Yeah, maybe. I don't like the loot scarcity. I'd like it to be like Season of Mastery to be Season of Raining Loot on people. You want it to be like Diablo. Yeah, exactly. Like you kill a boss and everyone gets 10 items.
Oprah stood there. You get tier and you get tier and you get tier.
You know, maybe not that extreme, but like, you know, with the shorter time and then like the faster release cadence, the new mechanics, the higher health. Might be nice if, like, you know, it was easier to gear the raid up, even compared to, like, former Classic. So, compared to Classic Era, I should say. Okay.
Mate, we'll move on to Gehennas. 2 more ads, debuffs more often. That seems pretty simple and somewhat in line with Lucifron, yeah?
Yeah, I was just about to say, see the response for Lucifron. It's a decurse fight. The Rain of Fire. People are going to have to be a bit more aware of that and moving out of it.
Get
that
a look
does
at
chunk
this legend
early on.
Here. Cheers, mate.
So less stress on your healers is always better. I can't see anything too crazy there.
Missed opportunity, Blizzard, to have the ads cast Rain of Fire as well.
Yeah.
I reckon, yeah. So you've got more like Rain of Fires at a time to dodge.
Well, you know they listen to the podcast. Yeah, they could still put that in, Hunk. You know,
it's true.
You
could be in that. And there's also like Season of the Quickening coming up.
Yes. Well, they don't listen for me. They listen for Hunk. So that's why I have him on the show so often now. They only tune in for you, mate.
And Jason from Shield Wall.
And Jason's music takes. Exactly. Now, where are we? We are up to Garr. The ads deal more damage and the ads debuff. I feel like there's more to this one that's not in these notes. I thought they were
spawns an ad that charges. Yeah, he spawns an ad that charges a random raid member and explodes.
Good times.
Apparently.
Explodes for how much, I wonder?
I'm not sure. It might just be like more about the knockback or something.
Right. I don't know much more about that one. That's all the notes I've got.
If there's a knockback in there, then it's going to encourage people to clear the entirety of that room again. I know towards the end, and I mean, I've got PTSD from basically up to Garr and Geddon, because we were farming bindings right up until the end of Classic. And by the end, we weren't clearing that entire room. We were literally just getting around the left-hand side and pulling the ads and Garr himself back to the wall. If you've got knockbacks and you've really got to worry about the rest of the ads in the room you're leaving, then it means a bit more time clearing those ads, but it's something else to do, something to consider. And
the meta's going to be absolutely to completely clear that room, I believe, considering what's coming next with Baron Geddon, because the meta will be pull Baron into the Garr room.
Okay, right. So I've not seen, like I said, I've not seen these fights sort of in the last few days, but that makes sense. I think it's great that people are already trying to find these ways of sort of encountering the bosses in a different way. I mean, everybody knows how you do Geddon. You go into his door, you get the bomb, just run off to the left-hand side. If people have already got the idea about bringing back into Garr's room, and now you've got, then I still think
I'll tell you why, mate. I'll jump in and tell you why.
Yeah,
we'll move on from Garr because, as North threw out there on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, he said, why don't we have multiple bombs? It seems like a simple fix for Geddon. Well, that's exactly what they did. Living bomb now is put on 3 players, and those players leave behind a fire on the ground, I believe. I think it's from the players that do the living bomb. They leave a big AoE fire on the ground once it goes off. I think, again, guys, if I'm getting it wrong, I'm sorry. But so the strat now is, well, we can't have 3 players sort of needing to dive out of the raid and then leave these large patches where, other people can't really go for a little bit. We've got to do this in Garr's room where there's, real estate galore, again, unlike Sydney.
Well, that was like the original strategy for Geddon back in vanilla, was to clear Garr's room and pull Geddon into Garr's room, so you had all that space to like maneuver him. So I think that's a simple Geddon change that works really well to make that fight a lot more, like, not necessarily difficult. It'll be something that'll be pretty easy to handle once people get used to it, but certainly more fun.
I mean, nothing's standing out at me so far as being a mechanic that players haven't encountered yet. I mean, the bomb and then the fire on the ground, I immediately think of Grobulus with you would
the poison.
Yeah, and then you leave the poison, and then again, it's all about area denial. But people are familiar with that and how you combat that. So yeah, nothing's standing out so far as being, we really need to learn this brand spanking new mechanic. Anything that makes the fight more fun.
And that's the thing. And I think that's why it's too early to really judge this as harshly as some people are, because number one, like I said, people are saying it's too difficult. And then number two, the clapback to that has kind of been just what you've said, Whats. Well, like, is it too difficult or is it just new and unexpected? Because the mechanics in and of themselves, this isn't craziness. With a couple of weeks of learning a fight, as normal progress generally dictates, you're not going to go in and roll in straight away. If you're presented with a new fight, it might take a week or two to figure it out. Then you got it on farm. Hey, MMO gaming. But people are freaking out that, I won't have this on farm straight away. This is unacceptable. I do think that decent guild coordination and communication will result in, getting these bosses down. Again, if they're balanced a certain way with the health pool too. So I'm with you. I don't think Blizzard had to necessarily reinvent the wheel with these mechanics. I wasn't expecting, retail-like mechanics or Final Fantasy XIV style mechanics. No, it was always just going to be a slight tinkering with things that we already see in Classic. And it is just, changing a number, more curses. Changing another number. Okay. Like, he does this at 20, 40 and 60% instead of just a 20% or something like that. Like those are relatively simple fixes, but it does just enough to spice it up. Because I think that's all like a lot of people in Season Mastery have been wanting. Like, again, what you've been saying, Whats, is just make it different. It's like the couple that's sex life has gone down the fucking shitter and you're just like, we just want to spice it up. Just do something different. It doesn't have to be fucking
their big go.
Please. Doesn't have to be like insanity. It just has to be different. And so I think it's something that Blizzard has really caught on to and they're doing well with here. But, you know, mate, let me throw it over to Shazzrah. I saw that image on the subreddit today of like 5 ads around him all doing arcane explosions and you had to find basically a safe spot. So I'm not sure if they come out one by one or how it exactly works, but basically Shazzrah now spawns static ads that throw out AoEs. I don't know the rate at which they come out or however it works, but I think that's really cool. Effectively like pushing a raid on what is known as a pretty quick fight, to just keep your eyes and wits about you and look for the safe spot. What do you reckon?
Yeah, like Shazzrah in vanilla, it was there was a lot of memes at the time of, you know, you'd have like your memes of like the ranged DPS there attacking it, and then you'd have like the melee DPS like standing off to one side with like a campfire going, and they're all just sitting around a campfire because no one could go in. And then obviously like the classic era meta was just burn him down from the word go, and he's just dead in like 20 seconds, wasn't he? So anything they can do, like I personally thought with Shazzrah, like just increasing his health pool was enough to make him significantly more difficult, in that you have to go through those teleport AoE phases consistently. But with the ad, that's a nice little change. Nice and spicy. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, I saw the image that you mentioned, Josh, and I'll be honest, at first I thought it was a Photoshop, because I thought that's a crazy change. This is flipping an encounter on its head. And I might go out on a limb here and say Shazzrah done properly to the mechanics was probably one of the better fights in MC before it changed to exactly as Hunk's just said, the range standing at the back, just nuke. If he teleported, somebody grabbed him, ran him back to the tanks, and that was it. When you'd got to have the essentially 3 spaces and the coordination of, oh, he's teleported here now, this group needs to go X, Y, or Z location. I got a kick out of the coordination. It was great. I enjoyed that fight, and it just died. This is turning it on its head, and it looks to me like a completely different fight. And I think this one's probably going to take a lot more working out to get it in a position where it's, you know, a definite kill. There's 6 circles on the ground in that picture. If that's just a time-based thing and the raid took a while to wipe and they just kept popping up, or whether that's the amount of explosions you got to contend with, I'll be really interested to see how that plays out.
Were they invulnerable, or could you kill them? Do you know what's you?
I don't know.
I haven't got a clue. I've not been in, mate. I wouldn't want to go and stand near them though, because I know how.
It also, I mean, not that I know everyone was kind of bringing them anyway, but just makes it even more important not to be that person that turns up and forgets their arcane pot.
Yeah, that's something to consider. Yeah.
Let's try gold. You never brought it?
Not once to all of Classic.
I forgot many times, and luckily always someone was lovely and grim and would trade one with me, and I was like, oh my God, thank you so much.
I was that guy who just never had a pot and hoped no one called me on it.
All right, Golemagg. Cast Earthquake, dogs are now enraged, debuff is bigger. Seems relatively straightforward, I don't know.
I thought he always casted Earthquake.
So did I.
Is it like a trample? Am I thinking trample?
Maybe. I think this is another one that basically says, look, we designed this room to fight Golemagg in. Nobody uses it. They just run down the left-hand wall. Everything on the right-hand side of the room sort of stays alive. It was one of those fights where it was the same again. You stack the boss, you pull the ads to one side, and it got nuked down. And that wasn't something that was reliant on gear. You didn't do that in later phases. You did that from day one. So this to me is just adding something to do in that fight rather than just spam your main ability.
Or before Warcraft logs updated, you stack the dogs on top of the boss and AoE for a bigger pass.
Hated that.
Originally, the way this fight was originally done in vanilla. Sorry to keep talking about how things were done in vanilla. You'd clear that whole area, you'd pull the dogs out and tank them, not too far away because they had that, they would enrage when they were a certain distance from you if they're too far away. So they couldn't be kited, basically. They had to be tanked. And the fight used to take quite a long time because, we were all really bad back in vanilla to the point where we had like healing rotations and we'd have like healers regenning while other healers were healing. Like it was, So that was how like the original Golemagg was kind of done. It's like a marathon kind of fight. Doesn't look like they're really like trying to bring that style of play back with these. They're more just making it, just generally more dangerous. The dogs are going to be hurting the tanks more. Golemagg is going to be AoEing the melee more. Yeah, that's fine. I'm cool with that.
Sulfuron Harbinger. Adds have linked health to all mobs, whatever that specifically means, and debuffs more often. How do you interpret that first line?
What do you recommend?
If I were going out on a limb, does that mean all mobs? Is that the remaining trash in the instance? Because by the time you're at Sulfuron, you've only got the trash up to Majordomo. I mean, we'd have done this in a different order. We'd have done Sulfuron before Golemagg. And we would have, cleared down the ramp to Golemagg, up the ramp to Majordomo after Sulfuron. But if you've got adds left over, and that's contributing towards the health of the 4 adds in the Sulfuron fight, that could be tasty. But it could also be I've got to go and clear those adds. How long is this going to take? Raid night was over 15 minutes ago. How long are we stopping? That could be a double-edged sword. But speculation. I don't know what the reference is to. Debuffs more often. See, Lucifron and Gehennas.
Adds have linked health to all mobs. I feel like I'm taking a language test. I don't know. It could be read a number of ways. Hunk, any ideas, or should we move on?
I don't know. Maybe they've got linked health with each other. Is that what that might?
Well, that's how I'm sort of reading it.
That's possible because it was separate health pools, wasn't it? And you just nuke them all down. They weren't on a shared health pool.
Yeah, I mean, you're meant to you'd assign your kick rotations and on the healers, and then you'd just
For a long time, you'd drag one into Baghdad, wouldn't you? And then leave everybody else at the top of the ramp.
Correct, yeah.
Majordomo, I think this is an interesting one. Immune to CC after 2 add deaths. So, is that like just no more CC in general in the fight once you've killed 2 adds, do you reckon? Yeah,
the adds will all be out of sheep, so you'll have to deal with 2 healers. So you'll need kick assignments and things. That's a nice little change, actually.
Yeah, that's moving the emphasis of needing mages knowing what they're doing for the majority of the first half of the fight onto, like say, classes with kicks and other kinds of sort of stuns that are going to be effective. As a mage, means it's one less thing to do in the fight. I can maybe focus on the adds and doing a bit more damage. 50-50 on that one. Blast wave hitting harder. Who's getting hit by blast waves?
Majordomo himself casts a blast wave.
So your main tank for the most part. I mean, he's out of the way anyway, and he's stood at the back of the room. The main tank standing between to catch him when he teleports.
Yeah,
that one might not have as big an impact.
Even in like phase 1, when I was playing my druid, I was able to keep that tank alive without even worrying about running out of mana or anything. Just a solo heal. So anything to put a little bit more like pressure maybe on the person who's tanking Domo would be nice. On the healers,
Yeah, I mean, you've also got to consider that tank might not be as geared in latter weeks of this fight as he might have been first time round, so that might be reliant on a bit more skill from the healers. So I think that's the big thing. The gear is going to make such a big difference if it's left at the standard drop rates. But then at the end of the day, people are clearing this on the beta in what's effectively 3/4 previs, and it's only going to get easier. So we'll see on that one.
Okay.
But the people who go into the beta to clear it, like, they're like obviously the sweatier end of the player base. People like Josh and...
How dare you? How dare you?
I love you.
So I was just there to test if I could get my hunter actually working in a battleground. Ragnaros, submerge at 50%. Suns now spawn at 30% without submerge.
Yes.
It really did look reasonably difficult, and I
wanted.
I'm here for it. Yeah.
All I wanted was people to have to go through that Suns phase. That's all you need to make it more difficult. That is quite a difficult mechanic. As we saw from the streams, most people wiped.
I was saying it is. I am all for this. You could have the most cohesive guild, on your server in this fight, but if the suns pop up and there's, just a slip in coordination, or you've not done it for that long that everybody forgets to stack because they're just tunnel vision, then you can be looking at a wipe. I think this could really, really contribute to just making it an enjoyable fight and feeling like you're defeating an end boss again. Ragnaros is the hardest guy in there, subjectively. This makes him a lot harder. Suns are really nasty. You can either focus them down or try and CC them. It's down to how you want to play it. I'm looking forward to this change.
Yeah, like the pulsing fire also mana burns, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and you ain't gonna have a lot of mana early on.
Yeah, and it is quite a dangerous mechanic to deal with when you look at the fight's now sort of 3.5 to 4 minutes long for most of the guilds I saw that did it, rather than sort of 2 minutes. So that mana is a lot more important, and there's a lot more just general AoE damage going out. So yeah, they've made the other Suns the nasty mechanic to deal with. They've made the fight designed in such a way that you need to do the Suns phase well to survive the rest of the fight. So
I'll be interested to see if there's a massive swing in raid composition because of some of these changes.
Well, this is the thing. Some people, like I said, sort of at the top of the show, again, don't kill me if this is wrong, but we're hearing that melee unfriendliness might already be a thing.
Yeah, potential.
There's a few things that stand out.
But if it's a fight by fight basis, if for example, let's say, I don't know, I guess it's tough. I'm not necessarily for melee unfriendliness, but I am for different classes performing in different ways on different fights. So the mages smash it on this fight. The warlocks kick ass on this fight. No one's beating a warrior on this one. I'm all for kind of things getting mixed up in that regard. I know it doesn't happen, but it wouldn't upset me.
Okay, I get what you're saying. I mean, you look at MC sort of from the early days of Classic, the warrior meta was rife, very, very early on. And things would just get smashed down and you'd have a raid full of warriors. If you've now got to bring enough utility for certain fights without swapping people in and out, then anything that moves away from that and gives those, like you say, those other classes, even meme specs, a chance, then I think that's better for the condition of the game and allows people to play what they want maybe more rather than, I'm going to perform best on meters or look better in my guild by playing this class that they need me to play, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm just on the rag thing. I just wanted to say again, it's going to be such a touchy issue what the actual difficulty winds up being in Season of Mastery. But, I'm on the record for not wanting crazy difficulty, but wanting a challenge. But more importantly, wanting a situation where not every fucking person is walking around in the same gear in the game. And if this creates a situation where, let's say, the vast majority of guilds eventually can down MC for the most part without too much of a headache, but then you get to rag and you hit somewhat of a roadblock. I'm all for that in an odd way, because I'm like, whether it's the last boss of every fucking raid or whatever, but creating a situation where not every, warrior is rocking those, AQ shoulders or whatever that we talked about in the past. But like, if not every guild that steps into MC can down rag easily, it now creates a level of mystique around the guilds that do. And it's like, well, you have to commit, you have to push yourself to be able to get this, and then we get access to these items. These items aren't necessarily on the table for everyone. Not every item is meant to be for everyone. There is a certain sort of like sorting process that the game is organically doing, separating weaker guilds from stronger ones, where like, and I'm not saying that rag necessarily needs to be the benchmark, but eventually, like, I like the concept of not everyone being able to kill everything, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but if the first half dozen bosses of each raid were doable, but then the last couple were like, fuck, this is a step up and it's actually going to be only for the good guilds, then I'm okay with that, weirdly.
Okay. I'm more of the, in the, let everybody have a chop at everything kind of thing, I don't mind if people.
I'm not saying it needs to be insane. I'm just saying, like, punishing almost pug level type groups from like, well, if you want to kill this boss, Ragnaros, you might need can we just ask for a little bit of coordination and skill?
I'm going to go full Keanu and be the devil's advocate here and split right down the middle of both of you. I know exactly what you're saying, Josh, in that you recognize, and this is going to sound awful, but I know what I mean in my head. You sort of recognize greatness. You see a guild name, or certainly used to. I'm thinking back to the TBT the first time around. You would see a guild name, and the people in that guild are capable of doing the hardest content. When you might be in a mid-tier guild, but more than happy with that. A lot of people might not be happy with it and want to achieve more, but can't because of the sort of, the level the rest of the guilds are or whatever. But I can still sort of reel off the top 3 Alliance guilds on our server on Hellfire from back in the day. I couldn't tell you who they were in Classic because everybody was achieving the sort of same thing at some point. Whereas, they kind of stand on a pedestal. But I get what Hunk's saying in that it does stop the more casual player being able to, run around in the cool looking gear or get a bit of a head start on the next phase. And that might be disappointing if that player's putting all their available time into the game to be sort of just blocked by the difficulty of the content.
Well, I'm halfway. I don't want to seem like the bad guy here. I'm not trying to deprive people of, either playing the game or seeing content, but I am kind of like, I'm just so entrenched in this. Not everyone should be wearing the same gear. Not everyone should be in full bis all the time. And maybe I'm just a dinosaur in thinking that. And I might be the problem here. That's fine. But yes, you're right. Like, I miss the days of guild notoriety in terms of like, oh fuck, those are the good players. Like, wow, one of them just walked by. Like that is fun. But as I say, it's also the homogenous nature of the gear when just everyone looks the same in the town and no one's special anymore and we're all basically the same players to a certain extent. I don't know if there's a way that's fair that kind of avoids that from happening.
Can I raise a concern?
Yeah.
So my biggest concern with the loot scarcity combined with increased difficulty is going to be guild poaching.
Yes, yeah.
I'm quite worried about that. Like, you already experienced a little bit of that in Classic, and it didn't really matter too much, because you could clear the content anyway. But back in original vanilla, when this stuff was kind of hard, you had like a lot of feeder guilds to like the top tier guilds on like the biggest servers.
Yeah.
It would just like, you've got like a mage who's got like, who's geared up. They've got tier or whatever. And they suddenly get poached by like the better guild on the server, and then they leave the guild. You might start seeing that a bit in Season of Mastery if the content's challenging enough, combined with the loot scarcity. And I get what you're saying. You want everyone to have different gear and look better, but it also means that, like, how do you run a guild like with a fair loot system when people are like, well, I'm down the bottom for this item, I'm not going to get this and this, or I'm new, low priority for loot. I'm probably better off just joining a +1 pug.
And you're spot on. You're spot on. It's going to be a problem. I'm there with you in your concern. And like, I'm not saying, please, I'm not saying my beliefs are right. I'm fully there and acknowledging, like I say, I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I don't even know if it's necessarily like I know it's probably not the popular thing to say. It's probably even the wrong thing to say. It's just one of those stupid old things of mine. But like, when I hear you raise a concern like that, I completely agree with you 100%. Like, it is coming. This is fucking coming with this loot scarcity thing. There's going to be those moments, and you should all sit there at home and expect this when you're like, remember Timmy, our main tank, who we just fucking spent the last 6 months gearing up? Yeah, well, he just left for fucking Old Mates Guild. Oh, remember the priest that we just gave 8 out of 8 to? Yeah, well, he joined that guild that's really geared up, and now we don't have him anymore. And it's gonna like fuck a lot of people, and I guess you're right in that if you want to somewhat water down that drama llama situation, well, I guess is that more a difficulty issue or a loot dropping issue?
I think it's both, because
both, yeah.
Like the point at which it's really going to hit will be going into the next tier when there's, you go from tier 1 to tier 1 to tier 2. And that's when the loot scarcity is really going to hit you when most of your raid, like you're not going to have, warriors aren't going to have weapons, and rogues aren't going to have weapons. They're going to be missing a lot of their biscuit. You might have people like, going into that phase next phase who've only got like 1 or 2 items out of MC the entire time, So if you get, say, like, there's a warrior that has, say, they've got, what is it, like Deathbringer, like they've got the Deathbringer axe from Onyxia and like, like the belt from Ragnaros that they all want. What's that belt called?
Onslaught Girdle. And you can tell you're a filthy horde player, profiling axes above swords for warriors. Yeah.
You got me. We're playing Alliance in Season Mastery, so.
Good, you've seen the light. You're still on the wrong time zone.
I've been converted. But yeah, we're, I can see like warriors like that. If your guild hits a bit of a roadblock, we don't know what Blackwing Lair is going to be like. There's a lot of things they could do to make that more difficult. Thinking to the original mechanics of like how guilds used to do Blackwing Lair. You could find that geared warrior getting poached by like a guild who can just smash through it, and is like a parsing guild just because they have a Deathbringer and an Onslaught Girdle. And that'll just be enough. Like those 2 items, they've got those 2 BIS items from that phase.
I feel like there's limitation to how often it could happen, though, if there is a scarcity in gear, because it's not like you're not necessarily going to lose a person a week to it, if that makes sense. If we say you had 1 Drake Fang Talisman in the 8 weeks that you're going to be in BWL, and that person did get poached to a guild that's going to be trashing AQ40, you're losing a person. I still think that individual is going to be replaceable, and you always bring the player, not the class or the gear. You know what I mean? So it might not be as awful. I mean, it will seem it. You spent your time and effort gearing somebody up and running off, but it won't necessarily be the end of the world, I don't think. Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully not. But like, there's also that emotional impact of like, oh, we gave that guy the Drake Fang Talisman and then he just ditched. Like, it feels so bad. Like in Grim,
I mean, that happened in Classic as well. Yeah.
And like, we felt so bad every time it happened. Like, what is going on?
How many did we lose again?
3.
Yeah, 3 tanks got Thunder Fury and bailed each in
like straight away. I know. And we didn't have any problems clearing any content, or we weren't wiping on anything. Like, everything was on farm. We just had them just leave.
The worst was easily the last one, wasn't it? Who left like 4 hours after getting it with his fucking brother.
Yeah, left with his little core of mates. Yeah. They all left. It's like he was just hanging around to get Thunder Fury. It felt so bad.
Fucking scumbags. That is,
you don't want him in the guild anyway. What an arsehole.
Oh, it was one of the greatest scumbag moments I've seen in the game. But anyway.
That's okay. I still like those guys. They're still nice fellas. It's just a game.
I just think the act in and of itself is such a dog act.
Yeah, it's pretty dirty. But you might see more of that sort of stuff. And
you will.
Does feel
100%.
so bad. And I like it it's a good way of making later phases more difficult just by having loot scarcity. It really is a good way. I'm just worried about the inter-guild drama.
In all honesty, just quickly on the loot scarcity thing. Look, I know a lot of people might be happy with how things are. Yeah, cool. Okay. Don't increase the loot rate drop. That's fine. It's supposed to be season of mastery. It's supposed to be challenging. Let's do this. But if we were to actually have that conversation with Blizzard and go, okay, guys, look, we appreciate what you're doing. It's really cool, but we really think that, maybe a little bit further down the road than perhaps you're projecting, this loot issue is going to cause such social division that, socially the game is going to be a fucking burning dumpster fire. A burning dumpster fire. You know what I mean? Dumpster fire. Is it the case, Hunk, where you'd be like, if Blizz came to the negotiation table and said, okay, we'll give you one extra piece per boss, would that appease you, or would you think that would even be enough?
That, that would be a gigantic increase in loot. That's massive. It's like a 50% increase. Virtually. That might actually be too much.
Right. So you'd be more down with what was said earlier with like a chance. Well, I think I personally, I'm a gambler, mate. I love the concept of like the slot machine and the 50% chance of having the extra piece drop and everyone goes, hey,
I like that actually. Look, I could just be being a cynical prick with this issue and people might actually like come together and work really well. And like there'll be a lot more tight-knit guilds who are like really keen on, getting through the progression. I could just be being a cynical prick. I'm just looking at my experience on the Aragorn realm where it was a Wild West. Like there was no consequences for bad behavior. People just did whatever the hell they liked. Like there were just so many people on the server, reputations didn't follow, and even people with a bad reputation, didn't matter.
I would hope that the almost disposable sort of outlook on the whole the idea of season of mastery means that people won't get too attached to sort of shiny things.
Yeah.
It's going to disappear anyway. It's not like you're going to be carrying it into an next expansion or anything like that. That in an ideal world would be the case. There's still going to be sweaties that are going to want, like you say, your onslaught girdle and the hit percent ring and Drake Fang talisman, but it's things we've experienced before. It's not new toxicity or anything like that. We can prepare ourselves for it at least.
I actually really, really want that thing we just talked about now. I'm thinking more about it and I'm just like, oh my God, like the amount of awesome moments you'd get where imagine if like whatever it was, whether it's a 30, 40, 50% chance of an extra piece of loot dropping and you down Garr and it actually shows you like a glowing extra bonus slot for the loot and it's a binding and everyone just fucking loses their mind.
They would too, wouldn't they?
I wouldn't know. I've never seen a bind. Well, I say I've never. We saw literally 2 pairs in 2 years. It was disgusting. But yeah, that'd be like Diablo-esque. Suddenly he's glowing purple and then he's glowing orange. It's like, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. These levels of gear on bosses though. I mean, equipment had an item level even back then. So I think I'm sure I saw something regarding Blizzard saying, look, gear is going to be harder to obtain or a bit scarcer. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be less on the boss. If you look at it from an item level perspective, bosses might drop a little bit more of the sort of entry tier epics, things that people wouldn't normally want or they pass up because it's not their bits. And then an equal level to what we're used to of the better stuff, the higher item level. And that way you're at least kitting people out in what is a slight upgrade rather than them holding out for the best upgrades. But having said that, epics aren't necessarily better than blues. The developers have always said they put epics in that weren't necessarily as good, but it gave people the feeling, oh, I've got an epic. I've replaced a rare with an epic. I've advanced my character. So mix and matching, I don't know if that's an option or just looking at what gear they add the sparsity to. I'm just rambling now. Sorry.
No, it's all good. Guys, I'll move on from MC, but not before I just put in this one last question to you, because the comments that were popping up today that I noticed were interesting, in that people were sort of saying, you know, the naysayers who are like, oh, fuck this, they've gone too far. Now they've made MC more difficult. The supplementary comment along with that was usually the loot in MC is pretty fucking ordinary anyway. Why would I want to slog through that place just for fucking, you know, the shit rewards that it's got? Now, I disagree with this take. I should say that off the bat. I think there's some fantastic gear in MC, and obviously there's gear in there that stays relevant for a very fucking long time for some classes. I was just a little bit shocked at the prevalence of this kind of comment of people saying like MC gear is shit, MC gear is shit. Look at all these horrible things that it drops, you know, Seal of the Archmagus, ha ha ha. A long time ago on the show, one of the first episodes of Countdown to Classic, I discussed the concept of bad items in MMOs and why they exist. And it's been something that's been sort of analyzed and broken down over the years. And it's a general game design principle in my belief, in my understanding that, and I agree with it. You've got to have ordinary items in order to make the good items look better, right? People don't cheer over Band of Acuria dropping or what have you, if everything in the raid is good. If everything is a fucking awesome item, oh fuck yeah, you know, it becomes passé. Everything is good, so nothing's good. I think that the reason that you have so many shitty green items in the game, a decent amount of drops in MC that are somewhat yawn-worthy, is to really accentuate the awesomeness of the good pieces. So from a game design philosophy, I understand why they've done it. And I think it's really cool how it works. Like, not everything does need to be awesome. And so for people to say like, I'm not even going to go to MC, like it's just hard and it's got shit loot. So fuck you. I'm not going. To which the answer might be, well, good luck in BWL without MC gear. But, it's just, sorry, I am very much so monologuing here, guys, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Like, how do you feel about the MC loot table in general?
I think anybody that disagrees with you should go read the WoW Dev Diary by John Statz, because he basically outlines exactly what you've just said. Certain items were just put into the game to fluff the ones that really were top tier, you know, and to make it seem like, wow, these are really, I keep mentioning Onslaught Girdle and Quick Strike Ring, but they were revered, you know, across a lot of classes. This won't be the only MMO to do it. You know, it's one of them, but I don't think anybody can really disagree with you. As for the actual sort of gear table itself, there are lots of notable pieces for, like you said, for a long time. The bow from early on, the hip sent bow for ranged and melee classes, the Mage Blade. Mage Blade and staff drop from the same boss, but people revere the Mage Blade over the staff because then you can have maybe like a tasty offhand with it. They're the exact same stats. They just take up 1 or 2 slots. I think it's a really good loot table. There's a lot of loot in there. Yeah, there's some real stinkers, but you feel a much higher sense of accomplishment when you do eventually get them tasty bits, I think.
Yeah, I think if every item's going to be perfectly itemized, great drop, you might as well just drop currency and have people buy the items they want at the end of the day. Like, so I agree entirely. Like, you've got to have bad items to make good items look better. And if you're going to have every item be a good item, why not just drop currency and tokens for everything?
Guys, we'll move on from MC. Thanks so much for all that. You two have been brilliant so far. I'll try not to keep you too much longer, but I do have a bunch of other topics I want to go through, but I don't want to be stupid about it. Look, we'll try and sort of zip through these as quickly as possible, given how long we've been going so far. Hunk, you and I were chatting with Alenia yesterday when all this stuff was sort of being discovered. And, I think we'd be remiss not to mention that, I feel like things have, to a certain extent changed dramatically for the hardcore community in terms of this whole Road to Rag event and the chasing of the dream of downing Ragnaros without losing a life. You know, it to me, with these very, very short testing windows that we're getting right now. Like, for example, they seem to only be opening these raids up for testing for like 24 hours and then taking them away, and then maybe a few days later bringing it back for 24 hours. And it's all very short and sharp. We're not getting sort of a really, really good look or play around with some of these mechanics or numbers. We were sort of saying yesterday, it does seem to be, unfortunately, the case that the road to Rag, while I appreciate the optimism that might still be there and they're absolutely still going to go for it, might be borderline impossible now. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I feel it's kind of like going to hit those guys pretty hard, but I know that they're in there and there's testing windows practicing it. They have got it. I think pretty sure they got a clear early this morning. On it from their core. And I reckon if they can use these little testing windows to the fullest and learn the raid, I don't think it's dead. I think if they can practice it, it's not going to be, I don't think it's DOA. I did think it was DOA initially, but now I'm coming around. I think if they can practice it, they'll be fine.
Well, it all comes down to the practice. I just don't know if they're going to get enough practice in. That's the only problem.
Yeah, I know it's hard to coordinate. There's like people from all over the world. We don't know when the testing windows are, so people can't plan around them.
One thing on the
private service.
Sorry,
maybe they'll do a private server to test
on. One thing on the road to Rag that I ran into yesterday. I had a chat in the Blizzard Discord about the road to Rag stuff, and there were some calls for the raids to be nerfed immediately or the changes reverted immediately because it made things so difficult for the road to Rag people. It was something that I sort of immediately jumped in on and pushed back a bit on because I disagreed with it, where I was like, I love what's happening with the hardcore community. It's a large community. It's a passionate community. I think it's fantastic for the game and it will drive a lot of interest in Season of Mastery for sure. But when we start to encroach on a point where it becomes you should design the raids around this Road to Rag event, I could not disagree with that suggestion more. I think there is a far greater good to not specifically designing a key raid around an event as opposed to the whole player base and what they're doing. So I'm applauding Blizzard for kind of tinkering with a lot of stuff in MC. And I'm just presuming that it's something where they're not necessarily going to be taking that into account when making the changes that they are. I don't believe that they're trying to find a happy medium here where, like I said, they don't want it to be too hard, but they want it to be challenging. And I don't think they're necessarily going to say, oh, okay, the hardcore community wants us to make this a pushover so that they don't all die and they can get their achievement. And nor do I think they should do that. It's just something that I noticed pop up in conversation yesterday that I just sort of wanted to get off my chest, where I'm just like, yeah, I don't think that's the way to go, where a portion of the player base is sort of now dictating how the game is specifically designed in one encounter. But anyway, that's just me.
I agree with that take.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I've got utmost respect for, everybody in that hardcore community, and Elenia's been a fantastic ambassador for it. Ambassador, for it.
Yeah, no, she's been wonderful, yeah.
She's been incredible. And what they're trying to set out and achieve, I thoroughly hope that they do it, but not at the expense of the rest of the player base. I'm 100% with you. I mean, this is a way to play the game that a proportion of the community have chosen to undertake. It's not a core mechanic of the game. And yes, there's some integrations being made with like the buff and the achievements, but that's just a way of tracking it. In my opinion, it's not a massively fundamental change to the game. And 97, 98, pulling numbers out of thin air, a large proportion of the player base aren't going to maybe even know it exists, never mind really care about doing it. I hope they do it. I hope they achieve it. But in doing so, changing the encounters for everybody else, that's not a positive way to go.
Guys, I want to touch on a couple more things, just very, very quickly. The PvP changes were announced as well. I mean, so much I feel like got announced in the last 48 hours that I haven't had a chance to talk about on the show yet. And effectively what they've said is they're increasing the rate at which we earn honor. There's probably a lot more to it. And I know the PvP nerds were in the Discord. I loved what I was seeing from you guys. You guys are the best. Literally, we were getting like, bar napkin maths. Like people were cranking out the formulas. If you check the Countdown to Classic Discord, like someone was being brilliant and putting down all these really extensive formulas on how they think things are going to work now. I couldn't understand a fucking thing, but I thought it was cool nonetheless. But, I think someone summarized it as basically being a nerf. Like, I'm going to get this wrong. Was it a nerf to honor decay in disguise, or was it basically just accelerating the amount of honor that you earn? So I'm not sure how the PvP community feels about this on the whole. I'm guessing it's been somewhat positively received, but people are saying, well, hang on. Aren't people going to get their PvP stuff too soon now? But we are working within the framework of a 12-month cadence, so it's got to come relatively soon. I don't know. What do you guys, have you guys looked at it much? Do you know much about it to comment?
Unfortunately, I'm not the biggest PvP guy, so I wasn't too zeroed in, but what I gather is that it'll increase the rate at which you obtain honor, but not necessarily decrease the decay. Is that how I'm reading that?
I wouldn't even dare to weigh in on it. I do not know.
I think from what I saw, the decay looked relatively similar, but it was the recovery rate. So the example I saw was somebody taking a week out in Classic versus like 2 weeks out of the grind in Season of Mastery. And I think it was the time frame then was another week of actually PvPing again. And in Season of Mastery, you're going to be in a better position in terms of the ranking after that week than you would have been first time round. So people can take a 2 week break out of grinding rank 14 and come back and really have only suffered a week's hindrance, if that makes sense. You're spot on, like you say, with the cadence though. What was a rank 14 grind, sort of first time round about? I mean, you're talking a good couple of months at least, 2.5 months. That puts you firmly into Blackwing Lair if we assume everything's going to be an 8 week release cycle. So yeah, the PvP gear's got to come at some point and not be too late. So
true.
All right, I'll have to grab the PvP big brains at some point and have a chat about that. But look, guys, I'll wind up the serious stuff there and just say thank you so much. Look, I could go longer, but I think I might actually save it for another time, because what I was going to do is, for whoever's interested, Hunk, I might grab you at some point in the future. Not that I want to keep sort of taking you hostage and throwing you on the podcast, but I'd love to have the very casual chat about just, we don't have to talk news. We don't have to talk sweatiness. Just what we're doing. Hey, my name's Josh. I'm playing a hunter. These are my dreams and aspirations for Season of Mastery. This is the stuff I'm looking forward to through the leveling process, and just having a bit of a laugh and a chin wag about that. How does that sound in the future?
No, it sounds fantastic.
Very good. Well, we don't have long. We've only got 2 fucking weeks, so maybe that's next week.
You got to get it done next weekend, yeah.
Very good. What are you going to play, by the way?
I feel like I'm probably just going to gravitate back towards Mage. I'm interested in trying different things. I feel like the meta is going to change. Maybe hopefully even like the talent builds, because everything revolves around a perfect scenario of gear and the talents you've got sort of backing that up. I'm curious to try things that I'm still relatively familiar with, and I enjoyed Mage. I only swapped in the start of TBC, so that, if not that, then Holy Paladin's always a good bet.
A reliable fallback.
Well, you're doing the Paladin thing, aren't you, Hunk?
I'll adjust depending upon what we're looking like with the sign-ups. But yeah, Paladin or Priest.
We're pretty evenly spread so far, aren't we?
True, yeah.
I was a bit shocked by that. We had like sort of two of every class. But guys, as Hunk's just alluded to, look, if you join the Countdown to Classic Discord, if you're looking for friends to play Season of Mastery with, I've just created sign-up sheets for all the regions, all the realms that hopefully will be available on release. You know, we're not forming guilds this time around. I don't think Season of Mastery will quite grab the population that would equate to Countdown guilds being formed like happened with Classic. But what we're going to do and what the hope is to just get collections of, you know, friends and acquaintances together where you guys can group up and maybe join a guild together that, you know, someone else is running. I think that's probably the best way to do it. And, you know, like I said, if you do happen to be an Oceanic player, there does seem to be a majority of us going PvE this time. I know that's not appealing to a lot of you, but I'm done with my PvP days. I'm happy to chill out on a PvE server. And already there's about sort of 20 of us banding together to play together on the Oceanic PvE server. So do come and take a look at that if you're interested. If you don't play in Oceania, there's US and EU sign-ups as well. Look, the people in the Countdown community are great, as you've heard from these two lovely gentlemen. Just like people know where you're going to be playing, and maybe you'll make a friend and you can have some fun.
You're okay.
All right, guys. Exactly. We'll leave it there. Hunk, as always, we'll probably speak to you next week, mate, but thank you so much again.
Oh, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And what's the biggest of thank yous to you, mate? You're a legend. I was floundering out there by myself and you came and saved me like the fucking Superman that you are. Thank you so much, mate. It's been brilliant catching up with you again. We missed you.
I know, you're very welcome. It's so glad. I'm so glad to be back. It's great. I know I've missed all you guys as well. You were floundering, and I could see you're in pain and you needed help. And I thought, well, you know, he's scraping the barrel, but what the hell? I'll put my hand up.
No, you're a good man. You did so well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. You did so well.